So anybody, you might get a little just pop up on your computer. So
just say, got it.
Yep, that's it.
All right.
Here we are. So good evening, everybody, and welcome. We're reaching across the Atlantic today. So I'm Kim MacLeod with Indie Authors World, and I'm absolutely super delighted that we've got our great friend, Mr. Hickman, John Lindsey Hickman, on the other side of the pond, shall we say, over in Maine. So, hello. How are you?
Doing well. Enjoying the nice weather up here.
Excellent. That's what
nice vacation. Nice vacation. Good place to work on things.
And you've got friends and family with you today to celebrate.
Yeah, I've got people here. My wife's here, Jennifer, and we've got brother-in-law, sister-in-law, nieces, nephews, everybody, and my son is here as well. So
we should have got Brandon playing as a little tune and some drums or something. Actually, that was.
Yeah, exactly. I should have him over there every time I say something. He can go da da da.
Just to get started. Yeah. So, so there was a little suggestion that we had just about a couple of minutes ago that hopefully this might work. We want to play you the book trailer for A Missing Link in Castaway County. So I'm going to hopefully, fingers crossed, that this actually might work. Share the screen. That's not what we want to see. A minute. It's always a challenge, right? Let's do this.
Pam, make sure you put the sound as well, because when you share the screen, it doesn't default to.
Right, share screen, share sound. Right, okay. Let's hope it's not going to. It's not playing the screen, is it? Why is it not going to there? So I can see it, but I can't see it here. No, best laid plans. It's not going to share the screen to show the video. So, oh well.
I think right. we sent it out on the invitations, didn't we? So
we did. It's out there on the invitation. We'll share it again later on for everybody so they can see it. So what I want to do is we're actually going to I'll start off and I'm going to read you the blurb for here we are, for the latest book, and here it goes. So, will a missing woman be found before it's too late? Sheriff Dell Hinton returns with a missing persons case that plagues his every waking hour. A young woman has disappeared in his rural county of Downeast Maine. She may well have run away, but the possibility of something more sinister is very real. With no ransom demand nor trace of the woman, even darker thoughts enter Dell's head. Will her body turn up and shatter the lives of the people of the close-knit county? Dell and his colleagues have almost no evidence to go on, so he decides to call on the help of the Maine State Police. The combined team starts their investigation in the backwoods of Maine, but will their search end in joy or the beginning of a hunt for a murderer? So, book 3.
Where's those drums, Brandon?
No, definitely needs a drum roll.
Yeah.
So, book number 3 in the Castaway County series. Oops, sorry, my light just fell over. How does it feel then, John, to get book number 3 out?
It's exciting. This book took a little bit longer to come out than the first 2, but it's exciting. And this for me, and this book is actually a little bit different, written differently than the first 2. So I was trying a new writing style, combining stories, kind of going simultaneously and then combining them. So it was something I had not done before, but I felt like the story itself really lent itself to that telling in that style. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun, and like I say, just different for me. So I figure if I can learn something new each book, I'm happy, you know, learning to do different things each book. So
yeah, and that's the thing, I suppose, with being a writer, isn't it? You develop your craft and you try something new, and you just have fun with it.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you feel like each book you feel like is better than the last. So you know, I guess I'll stop writing when I get to one that doesn't feel better than the last one.
So I wanted to kind of read out your author bio. You know, just a little bit about you that was in here,
Okay.
because I think for anybody who doesn't know John, this will give you some context that I want to kind of have some conversations about, you know. So
Okay.
it says that John Lindsey Hickman was raised in a farming community in south central Pennsylvania. He began his career in law enforcement as a deputy sheriff in Hagerstown, Maryland. John spent the majority of his 28-year career in law enforcement with the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office in Virginia. His varied experience included serving 10 years on the sheriff's senior staff with responsibility for daily operations of the Corrections and Court Services Division of the Sheriff's Office. He was one of the first nationally certified jail managers, and during his tenure, he published various articles and training documents for the American Jail Association and the National Sheriff's Association magazines. So, and then we want to just go on here that you live in Northern Virginia with your wife Jennifer, who's there tonight with us and giving us all a wave. And you enjoy spending summer vacations on a lake in Maine?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But you're a third generation owner of a property on the lake that you've summered there since the age of 5.
Yes.
And John's Castaway County series is set in a fictional community in Maine, the first 2 books having received an honour from the Indy Brag with Brag medallions. And we can find out more about you and your books and even songs at hickmanbooks.com or loonymoosepublishing.com. So there's lots of us for us to kind of delve into. Wow, great. There you are. Great bio. Great, so if anybody's got
well, thank you.
if anybody's interested and wants to ask questions about it, please put it in the chat and we'll probably get around to some of your questions too. So I suppose my first question for you is Dell Hinton really you?
Yes, he's my older ego. He's kind of the guy that's in the position that if I was able to select my perfect job, it would have been to be a small town sheriff in a little community, probably up here in Maine, or you know, somewhere probably in New England where it snowed and they had to drive 4-wheel drives in the winter and maybe even snowmobiles. That'd be fun. But kind of pictured myself and so personality traits that I do, like a vicious honesty, which sometimes is good and sometimes is bad, I guess. So, but yes, so he definitely is my alter ego.
And therefore, then, how much of the background and the day-to-day, like stories of stuff that's going on, how much of those are based around things that actually happened, or how much of it is just pulled from your imagination?
Basically, thus far with all 3 books, the main storyline has been totally fictitious. I've just conjured that up. But all the other little things, the incidents that happen around it, or the other things that Dell Hinton is working on or has happened to him, those are all things that either I did during my career or happened around me during my career. An example is in one of the books I'm talking about, they were serving a civil process paper trying to shut down a company. Hundreds of satellites And so it was like, the question was, well, do you go in and you try to serve them with these papers that are going to shut them down when you know the satellites are up there and they're supposed to be in control of them? Are they going to fall out of the sky? You know, things like that. They're different stories, different things that actually did happen to me or happened to people right around me throughout my career. So I try to bring all those kind of things in as the little side stories and things that happen along the way. But the main story is fiction.
Okay. So in your career then, I mean, the role of a sheriff in the sheriff's office, I think, is quite different to what we experience here in the UK with the police force. There's lots of, you've got different sort of structures. So what kind of things does a sheriff's office really get involved in? I mean, are you looking at missing persons? Are you getting involved in murder cases? What is that?
It really depends what part of the country you're in the United States. Sheriff's offices vary extremely throughout the states. The sheriff's office that I worked at in Virginia was what they call a full service sheriff's office. So we did everything. We investigated any kind of crime. We, ran traffic, all manner of field operations. We ran the jail. We ran the courts, security, ran civil process, which is serving civil papers for people. So we really did it all. But if you go like one county over from us in Virginia, even in Virginia, the sheriff over in that county handles the jail, the courts, and civil process, and nothing else. There's a county police force there. So it's very dependent on any given jurisdiction, and it can change in the state. So there's not a real clear-cut definition. You have to know what it is for your specific area. But a police department doesn't do things like they have nothing to do normally. They have nothing to do with jails. They have nothing to do with serving civil process. So it can be quite a different situation. And if you're a full service sheriff's office like we were, and like Dell Hinton's sheriff's office is a full service sheriff's office, there's a lot more going on. Now, the one difference of writing it in Maine, and this I found out in the very first book actually, is the fact that in Maine, a sheriff doesn't really investigate major crimes like murders. The state police is responsible for investigating major crimes, and then they just ask for the sheriff's office to help them with a lot of the interviews and things like that, because they know the sheriff's office knows the local people. So it can really be extremely different, even in our country, in any given state. And so, and I'm sure it's different in the UK and different other places.
Yeah. How important was it for you to try and make the setting and what was happening in the book as real as possible, so that it did really show what happened in your sort of previous roles?
Well, one of my aims when I first started writing was that I wanted to give people a little bit better knowledge of the difference between sheriff's offices and police departments, because a lot of people don't know that, and they just kind of lump all law enforcement together, and there is a lot of differences. And so I wanted to kind of bring that out, and I even talked in the first book about an election, and went through the kind of the election process, so people would understand how that works. And so I've always had that kind of idea that along with my writing, I was hoping to kind of educate people a little bit as well.
Yeah. As well as tell a good story then. So
yes.
That's
yes. Yeah.
And how, I suppose, like Deborah's asking a question just now that kind of was where I was going to go anyway. So we'll pick up Deborah's question was, have you had to change some of the book because it was too true to life and that people might even recognize themselves in it?
Oh,
so
yeah.
Are any of the characters, sort of based around people that might actually recognize themselves?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the one that I was telling you about with the company that was actually running the satellites, controlling the satellites, I had to, and I'd already been retired, I think, when I wrote that book, maybe for 5 years. And so I had to call back and find the sergeant that had been in charge of civil process at the time and ask her, I needed to ask her what the name of the company was, to make sure that the company name that I was going to use didn't sound anything like it, and to make sure that I had the basic facts right, because I didn't want it to be a problem. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, just changing the name or sometimes I've had to change specific, make one of the stories that I was trying to tell, side stories, change it a little bit so that at least it would be a little bit more hidden, so that I wouldn't have some deputy or some company calling me and just giving me a holy heck about it.
Yeah, can be quite difficult, I suppose, if they're coming looking to arrest you for sharing stories.
Yeah, well, and the other problem too is, I got to be honest with you, at my age and as long as I've been retired, I scratch my head sometimes going, did I really do that? Did that really happen? And then I think I have to call somebody that I worked with and say, did we really do this? Am I right? Is this what happened? So I end up fact checking myself sometimes for that reason.
So your characters, you've got the sheriff, you've got Dell Hinton, who's
Right.
A kind of rounded sheriff, a rounded guy there to kind of to look after the place. And there's another character that he describes in the book that he couldn't run the office without.
Oh, Irish.
Irish,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
tell us a little about Irish then.
I'm not sure exactly where I got the inspiration for Irish. I mean, I think anywhere I've ever worked, whoever was in charge always had one person, whether it was the personal secretary, whether it was some kind of an administrative person, there was always that one person that was like their right hand man, so to speak. Somebody that they could really count on. They could float ideas by. Would just always keep them in line. And there was, when I first went to work for the sheriff's office, there was a lady that at one time had been the sheriff's, I guess, administrative assistant, like that. And then she had the sheriff's office. So they changed sheriffs a lot, obviously, because they're elected officials. And so a new sheriff came in, and she suddenly was working with us. And I remember what a forceful woman she was, but how she really was kind of the glue that kept everybody together, at the same time. And so I just she's really an amalgamation of all those people that I had met through the years that really fit that bill.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. She's a great character. So she really is. I'm curious, I suppose, because sort of living with a crime writer, right, as well, who's Sinclair's on the call tonight as well.
That's a very good one, I might add. He's excellent. I love his books.
Do you have the ending? Do you know where the story is going to go when you start writing?
Generally, I don't. When I start a book, I basically kind of storyboard the idea to about halfway through the book with, this could happen, that could happen, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. And then as I'm writing, sometimes I deviate a little bit from the plan, just if it looks appropriate. But as I get to that half, usually by then I feel like the story is really kind of writing itself, and I kind of let it go to whatever the ultimate end is. I may have an idea who I think is going to be like the person or whatever, but a lot of times even if I do, I will switch to somebody else as I'm going along, because I just kind of get into the flow of the story myself as I'm writing it, and let it kind of go that direction that it seems to feel natural for it to go in.
Yeah. So do you think your characters actually start to take over?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think they take over, and I think I take over as Dell, and I start really feeling like I'm Dell, and I'm doing all these little things and that kind of thing. So yeah, I do. I think they kind of take over and kind of work the story through themselves.
Yeah.
And I hope they're more plausible because of that, rather than me saying, "Oh, I want this person to be guilty or that person." I hope that doing the story that way makes it more of a pleasure to read and more natural to read.
Yeah. I mean, in this time, obviously we were working with you, and you had the external editors that are like coming in and giving you some pointers. And how was that process for you? Because I know that was a different experience for you.
Yeah, this was the first book that I ever used an actual editor. The first two books I basically had my wife and other friends and other relatives read the book and give me input that way. But I found it just because I've never done it before, and because kind of art or what have you kind of take ownership of it. So then if somebody says no, that won't work or that's not right, your first thought is, what the hell do you know? But when I'd sit and think, a lot of times the editor was right about things. There's some things I didn't agree with, or some things that I felt like there wasn't as clear an understanding of why I was doing it. And so I may not have changed it, or I may not have changed it, or did change it, but changed it in a different way than what the editor had suggested. But by the time I was done, I was actually very thankful for the editor, and the editor was able, I think, to make the book much better.
Yeah.
And I think the editing process definitely made the book much better than it would have been if I had just sent it in and it had not been edited.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things. I think as an author, you learn to embrace the editor. The poor editor probably feels bad, but you embrace the editor, because the editor really is there to help, and they do a really good job, and they make sure that you get a better finished product.
Yeah, and that's always the intention. But yeah, I can totally understand. You that whole thing of, I don't want to. Somebody's put a red pen through my work.
I'm sure Sinclair's had the same thing. If somebody tried to give him advice on something, he's like, "Oh no, I don't like that," or or who are they to say that? I know my character better than they do. But the fact is, the perception of the editor, that extra perception is really very helpful. I think.
Yeah.
So I like to say I can embrace the editing process.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I won't butt heads with them a little bit, but I absolutely embrace it.
And Jennifer got off the hook a little bit then that way with she'd
already
done her work.
The first two, she was like, "I'm not talking to you anymore because you just won't take any of my ideas."
Yep, I know that. We've had those conversations here too. So Rachel's got a question for you. She says, in the future, would you write a side story where your side characters, for example, maybe Irish, could be the main character in a story?
Yeah, kind of like a spin-off.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I mean, I think that would be good. Matter of fact, somebody else had suggested that, and I think it's a good idea. I just would have to sit down and figure that out and how I wanted to do it. And I know Sinclair did it. He's got what, 2 or 3 different projects that are basically spin-offs of other ones. So yeah. So yeah, no, yes, I think that would be a good idea.
He's always got a few. He's always got a few on the go, and that's what I wanted to pick up on, was how the two of you actually met all those years ago, and it was over Twitter. My understanding, if I remember correctly.
Oh, Jen and me, you mean?
No, Sinclair.
Sinclair and you.
Sinclair, yes, Sinclair and I met over Twitter. He had, if I remember correctly, he had written a tweet about music, and it was about the Rose, the song "The Rose," and he and I both, as it turned out, it's a big song for us. We both really like that song, and I love the imagery in it. And he had said, "The Rose" by Bette Midler, and I had written back, and I had said, "Yeah, Bette Midler made it famous." But I said, do you know who actually wrote it? It was a woman by the name of Amanda McBroom. And I don't think he knew that. I'm not sure. And anyway, so we just started talking about it because we both loved the imagery in the lyrics of "The Rose." and I'm also a songwriter. I mean, I write song lyrics. That's one things I do. So it was just kind of and so we just kind of started talking about that and talking back and forth. And then he had told me about his first book. I think it was The Reluctant Detective, if I remember correctly. And I bought that and I read it and I loved it. I really enjoyed that. And we just, we ended up building quite a nice little friendship. And then on our next trip, Jen and I make, not as frequent as we used to, but we make trips over to Ireland to visit our Irish relatives. And that particular trip, we made a side trip to Scotland and came and met you guys. Yep. And it was really wonderful. Except you got to remember, you got to talk slow. And I remember him telling you that. Speak slow. He's English. He's gonna have trouble. So I remember that when we first met at the pub. But yeah, that's exactly how it started. Was that those song lyrics? We just both enjoyed those lyrics so well.
Yeah, and I think it's such a wonderful story of when Twitter was maybe less fractious, perhaps. But that conversation, that joint love of music, that happened first before you both actually realised that you were writers. I mean, Sinclair, exactly. Do you want to unmute and if there's anything you want to?
I think we ended up spending a lot of time talking about music long before we got into the books. Because I remember we'd all talk about Led Zeppelin as well, and there was all kinds of things. Yeah. But it was great.
Yeah. No, it sparked an interest between us, and then we became friends.
Yeah.
Talk about it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Can't wait to just
And I was going to say that the two of you have been talking for a long time. So what I wanted to get the two of you on here and recorded was that you've been talking for a long time about potentially writing something together where your detectives might travel across either side of the pond. Is that ever going to happen?
I hope so. I hope it does.
Maybe Irish. Irish meets up with one of his.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely would love to do that, and he and I have talked about it a couple of different times, and not substantively like what the story would be, but just, hey, maybe one of us writes one half the book, the other one writes the other half. Maybe we just put the two, combine the characters, they visit each other. The story starts off in Scotland and then moves to America or something. Who knows? But yeah, I think it would be wonderful. I'd love to do it.
Oh, we've got Wendy saying yes, please, like in the 1980s when Jessica Fletcher teamed up with Magnum PI.
There you go. All right.
I think John's more likely to be Magnum PI. That must make me Jessica Fletcher.
Oh man.
Yeah, but Deborah says that sounds like fun, but what if one of you kills off the other's characters?
No.
Oh yeah, no, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do that.
No chance of that.
We'd be very respectful of each other's characters.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Kim?
Yes, of course you can. Yeah.
John, obviously law enforcement officers have to write a lot of reports. So what was the biggest challenge for you moving across to fiction from writing in the style that you obviously had to write for reports?
I think it was, and if you read the first book, you'll realize the first book sounds like a report. I wrote it in the third person, and it comes off sounding a little bit more like a report because that's what I'd been writing for 25 years. And we I don't know how we did it. Somewhere along the line it got sent.
You reviewed your book.
Yeah, a woman in England, I believe, wasn't it, reviewed the book for us, and one of her comments was, your personality sounds like it would come out much more if you wrote the book in first person. So I thought about it, and the second book, I actually wrote the first chapter in third person and then turned around and rewrote it in first person. And it was like a bell went off in my head, and I was like, well, yeah, that's a lot better. It reads better. It doesn't sound like a report. And so that was it. And I switched to writing in first person all the way along. And it made a big difference. But you're absolutely right, because of my report writing, and I was actually in law enforcement, I was called John I.R. Hickman for incident report, because my staff would tell you I wrote incident report after incident report all the time. I always told them, if you see anything that you do that you think you might get in trouble for later, you better write a report about it, so you've got it documented. And so I was just hell on writing reports. So but it did cause me to really zero in on that third person writing, where you don't have any, you're not putting any opinion in, you're just writing the facts. And so that was quite a change for me in writing a book, because you don't want to write it that way. So
we've got another author who is an ex-detective on this side of the pond, and he had exactly the same problem. It was just it was very sculpted and very like a report.
Oh yeah, because they drill it into you should never use your opinion. You only give facts. And 25 or 30 years of writing that way, and it's like, oh man, how do I put in opinions? How do I put in feelings? So yeah, it definitely, the transition was difficult, and my first book probably suffered a little bit because of that, but it's okay.
It's okay.
Thank you, John.
Yep. You've done a good job, right? I'm going to unpin you then, Sinclair. You can it moves back to the gallery. So Rachel's asked another question. She says, what made you start writing fiction? And where did the Dale character really then come from?
I started writing fiction, interestingly, because I'm like anybody else. I like to tell stories, and when cops get together, they love to tell what we call war stories, all the little things that happen. And I thought, writing a book would be a nice vehicle for being able to tell some of the funny little war stories. There was one that I put in one of the books, and I honestly don't remember which one at the time. And I put it in there because my son Brandon over here had when he heard the story, when I'd come home, from work and told him the story, he was like, man, that's a great story, Dad. You got to remember that, And so, that was really kind of the impetus for writing, was giving me an opportunity to tell my war stories from law enforcement. But I felt like the only way I could really do it was to have a major story that was fiction, to kind of pull it all in around to, and I've always had a pretty good sense of imagination. So
and it's great because now what you've got, obviously we've got this this one now out, and the other two which are sitting up on the bookcase. You might actually see it behind me up at the top shelf there, the sort of republished, so that they all look, we've got them all now looking like a series of 3 books, and exactly. That's,
and I'm already I've already started storyboarding a 4th book for the series.
Yeah, we are. Exciting. That's it. We're pleased. That's what I was just going to ask you, where you were going next. And did you have a story?
And again, this one's going to be maybe a slightly different style, because I'm going to kind of go back in time. One of the other reasons that I started writing, one of the other reasons that I placed the stories up here in Maine is because I have spent so many summers up here throughout my life, and I love being on the lake, and I like lake life in general, and it's an opportunity for me to talk about that. And our lake here has a pretty interesting history of the type of people that were here, say 100 years ago, and different things like that. They're actually, one of the presidents, I think it was Grover Cleveland, visited this lake at one point, came out on a fishing trip. So it has kind of a nice history. And so the 4th book, I'm thinking about trying to fit in a really old, like 100-year-old crime where I can go back and forth and have a lot of, as Dell is looking through the back issues of the local papers and things like that, trying to get his information, suddenly you're kind of transported back into what the lake was like 100 years ago, and some of the interesting people and just how it was. I mean, in the old days, people brought their cooks and their butlers up here, and things like that. It was really kind of a what you might call a hoity-toity kind of thing, but in a nice way. And so it's kind of an opportunity to maybe use some of that history of this lake and maybe a couple of the other lakes in the area and get some of that information in there.
And how much research have you had to do then with your books that you've written so far?
Not a lot of research. I mean, a lot of it was based on my knowledge in the business, but I did have to do research about Maine specifically, because even the first book, I think I had said something about they were going to the police academy, state police academy, and it was in Waterville, Maine. Well, I didn't realize till I talked to one of my friends up here who's a law enforcement officer that like 10 years earlier they'd moved from Waterville to one of the other big towns, moved the police academy, things like that. And I actually, the first book I started having Dell and his guys investigating this death right away. And I wasn't involving the state police. And it wasn't until I'd talked to my friend and found out that in Maine, the state police are the primary investigatory officers for murders, not the sheriff's office, that I realized that I needed to make that change. So in that respect, I've definitely had to do some here and there, just checking on Maine to make sure I wasn't running afoul of what was really going on, because I don't want to write something that's not true, because then because we've got a lot of friends up here in Maine who read my books. I don't want them looking at it and saying, "Oh, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about." That couldn't possibly happen here, because then that takes the credibility away from the book. So
yeah, and that's the thing. I suppose it's a bit like, I know that Sinclair had done similar, like going and talking to the cops here and the detectives, and finding out a bit more about how things really work, so that you've got that reality of the framework, I suppose, to hang your fiction on. So exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got another question. Wendy has asked, are there any authors or books that particularly inspired you, or that maybe you tried to model your work after?
Oh yeah. I love Robert B. Parker's books. He's passed away now, and some other people are writing books in his name for him. Who's the other one? There's another author I like really well. I'm trying to think now. I'll come up with it, but I like both of them have a similar style in that they tell their story through dialogue. And that's one thing. I tend to write the kind of book that I like to read. I'm not a big fan of books, and I'm not saying this against anybody. I'm not a fan of books that spend 2 or 3 pages telling me what the desert looks like or what the bar looked like they're walking into. I know there's value to painting a picture with words, and I understand that. But my general thought is, when I'm watching reading what I like to read, it is a more faster paced book. I figure I know most people know what a bar looks like when they walk into a pub as a pub, unless there's something special about the pub that fits in with the story, then I'm going to explain that. But I love one of the things I loved about Robert B. Parker, his books predominantly told most of the story in dialogue. And I found that I loved that. They were relatively short chapters, and they were predominantly dialogue. And so I kind of really took that to be my writing style, because I like that. That's what I like to read. And so that's what I try to do. Good question.
Yeah, good question. And so Rachel's got another question, and then I'm going to ask her if she can she's going to put up the links. If anybody hasn't got the books so far, we're going to put the sales links up in the chat as well, so that you can also go off and look to see that and buy it. Not right this minute, but you can save it. You can click on it and save it into your browser. There we are. Just Rachel's put up the UK Amazon and the US Amazon links there for anybody. But Rachel wanted to know, would you ever write non-fiction or maybe some sort of autobiography about your time as a deputy sheriff?
Man, that's a hard question. Now, it kind of goes back to the idea of would anybody get in trouble? You got to change the names to protect the innocent, so to speak. That
protect the guilty.
Yeah, some of that would be difficult. I actually had in our neighborhood, I had a gentleman approach me about a project, and I actually did not ever take him up on it. He was I don't know, 35-year veteran or something of the DEA, and he had done some really fantastic things in the DEA. And he was interested in, didn't know how. He wanted to, get it down, and he wanted to do a book. And I felt bad, but at the time in particular, I was writing fiction. I didn't feel comfortable doing that with him. It just, I don't think it would have worked. I have a little trouble with, I just think fiction is more my speed, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. And you can listen, you're able to share snippets of your life then, and the stories that you want to kind of remember in that fiction, even if that there's an element of truth perhaps to some of the stories, but it allows you to embellish them for the rest of us to read.
Exactly.
So I know that I asked earlier if you would be kind enough to read a little bit of your missing link for us, and I think that you've said that yes, you would be happy just to read a little excerpt for us. That would be great.
Okay, I can do that. The young woman woke up. She was in bed, but it was not her bed. She looked at the wall to see if her parents' photo was hanging in the familiar frame, but it wasn't. The wall was drab and bare. There was no window where it should have been. In fact, as she looked around the room, there were no windows at all. A huge lump caught in her throat, and she wanted to scream. Tears welled in her eyes, and she began to shake all over. She tried to force her mind to calm the spasms of fear and panic. I must remain calm. I must gain control of myself. I have to think. When she stepped out of the bed onto the floor, her feet were instantly cold. Gone was the familiar feel of the plush carpet she had come to love, that pale yellow runner her mother had given her for her bedroom years ago. In its place was concrete that had been painted with the traditional battleship gray found in many schools and other institutions where comfort is less of a priority than usefulness. The young woman walked all around the room. There was a combination bedroom, living area, a small bathroom to one side, and a small kitchen area to the other side, all of which were open to the main room. There was only one door with a non-traditional doorknob, which was securely locked and did not seem to have any key access on the inside of it. Oh my God, this place is designed to keep me in, not keep others out, she thought. She began to shake uncontrollably and started yelling as loud as she could. Panic had struck again. Help me! I'm locked in here. Help me! She stopped yelling, and an odd quietness settled in the room. No echoing, even with the most bare walls. It was as if her cries for help were somehow muffled, and she felt as if she could barely hear them herself. She tried again to yell even louder, but the result was the same. She wasn't sure if anyone on the other side of the door would be able to hear her, let alone anyone who might be passing by. And for that matter, she didn't have any idea where she was to begin with. Was she in a building in town? Maybe out in the woods somewhere? Had she been taken to a big city? Was she in a desolate ice warehouse? She returned to her bed, threw the covers over her head, pulled her knees up to her chin, and began sobbing. The last time she had sobbed like this was back in her school days, when she had found out that the first boy she thought she was in love with had thrown her over for the prom queen. And she just kept sobbing.
I think that's what we need to do.
I'm not a great reader for reading out loud, but that's okay.
No, well done, well done. But when it's your when a book launch event that we're here to celebrate, it's always nice that we get to hear the author themselves read a bit of their own work. It's it's really special when we get to hear that. So thank you so much for doing it, even if it was taking you out your comfort zone.
Hey, it's a stretch. I'm good at stretching.
So thank you so much. Is there anyone else got another question for the so Malcolm wants to ask, do you fish in the lake? He wants to know about the lake then.
Oh, yes. Fishing is actually quite good in this lake. Smallmouth bass mostly, and white perch, a few yellow perch. There's supposedly some landlocked salmon in the lake that once in a great while somebody will catch one, but it's been quite a long time. And pickerel, there's pickerel, not that anybody wants to eat those. But the bass are pretty good. I've got bass hanging on my wall at home that is about 4.5 pounds, which is decent size for up here. The cold winters and the stuff, they don't grow necessarily as big, but yeah, I do some fishing. Not quite as much as I used to. My brother-in-law over here does some fishing. My son does some fishing. My nephews do fishing. So lots of times I end up taking them out in the boat, and I just become the driver. So.
It's a lovely part of the world. I've certainly seen pictures that you've shared, and I hope that maybe someday that we can actually come across and visit you there. It would be lovely to see some.
If you check Jennifer's feed, she's walking around now.
Oh,
and
Jennifer's showing us.
She's showing you the cabin, and then she'll take you outside and show you the lake.
That's what we're going to do. We're going to add her. There we are to the. So she's taking us out on a little stroll.
Yeah, this is the front porch looking out at the lake. These camps, I should tell you that this property was my grandparents bought it 102 years ago. So it's been in my family 102 years.
Wow.
And back then there were no regulations, which is nice. So the camp was built right on the shore. I mean, really right up the lake. You step out the front door, you're like no more than 10 feet from the water line. So it makes it beautiful. I'm a cigar smoker. And my son is too. We sit out there and read books and smoke cigars and watch the lake, and that just makes us happy as can be. So
beautiful setting, absolutely beautiful setting. So thank you, Jennifer, for being our mobile camera person.
Thanks for being the mobile camera, honey.
Yep, and getting to see everybody else that's there with you, which is absolutely wonderful. So yep, Deborah said, yeah, exactly. We really are right next to it. They're almost in it.
Yeah, and we've actually got 3 camps on the property. So we got enough. It's like a little family compound here, and we end up we get a lot of the family members up here, and everybody gets a chance to have some fun and a lot of swimming in the lake. Although I got to tell you, sometimes the water's a little on the cold side. But we have a lot of fun. A
great place to spend time with your family. A great place to thank you for allowing us to come and join all your family and friends tonight and celebrate with you. So it's lovely to get a chance to do this in a slightly different way. So
yes, no, it was a lot of fun, and I'm still hoping that maybe I don't know if it'll be this fall or next spring, but one of the two we're going to try to get a trip across the pond, and we'll make you all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
It would be lovely. So good. So what sort of customary at this point in the evening, we say to everybody, if you would like to unmute your mics, and we can give John a big cheer, a celebration. It all gets a bit noisy for a minute or two, but seeing as we can't all be in the room with you, but we're going to do that anyway. So if everybody wants to unmute, and we'll just say congratulations and thank you so much.
Hey.
Hey.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have a lot of faithful readers too.
And I'm sure we'll have some more fans that will be joining us, joining you shortly then with when they get to have a look at your books and go off and read. And by all means, if everybody can, because we know what the best thing is, if people can actually share a review up on your up on Amazon for you, if anybody does get a chance to go and read your books there. It's a great way for everybody to kind of help each other out in terms of authors and kind of help share the word. So yeah, please go off and do that. So thank you so much. We're going to end the formal proceedings for this evening, and I'll now stop the recording. So